Hi friends, my name's Trish Roberts, and I have a few pages on Facebook. I have Faint Signals from Vega, and I have Live Vegan, and Vegan Trove, and How to Go Vegan, which is probably my favorite, howtogovegan.org. And since I can't post to any of those pages because Facebook hasn't given, at the present time, there's no way of doing so for people in Australia. I live in Australia, I live in Tasmania. And so I thought, since I can't actually post, have this live on my pages, I'd just do it on my personal page. Hi, Alisa. And so as I said, I live in Tasmania, Australia, and it's at the southern tip of Australia, and it's a few hundred miles to Antarctica, and the weather's very lovely here. I love it anyway. It's very cool, and it's cool, but it also has very mild summers. And so I wanted to talk today, if I may. I have a lot of friends on my list, and probably most of you may not know or may not have heard a whole lot about veganism. And before anybody goes, if anybody joins in on this video, before you go running off, you may not have heard this particular version of veganism, because a lot of what is presented about veganism to the public is fairly distorted, and the reason that is because it doesn't come from an ethical position. It doesn't come from an ethical position at all, and there's reasons for that, which I probably won't get into in this video, but I'm going to just talk about the ethical reasons why one is why one should go vegan. And veganism is an ethical position. It's not really a diet. It's not. A lot of people talk about it in terms of health and diet, and of course that's very helpful to talk about veganism and the wonderful health benefits one can derive from a plant-based diet. But veganism is much more than a diet. It's an ethical position which rejects using animals for food, clothing, entertainment, and other reasons. And that includes rejecting the idea of happy animal slavery, humane animal use. And we often hear that from large animal organizations. They often promote the idea that there's such a thing as humane animal use. And in another video, I'll just talk about that particular issue of the myth of humane animal use. So vegans, an ethical vegan, which is what veganism is, rejects using animals for food, clothing, entertainment. And food, when I say food, I mean dairy, eggs, honey, and dairy, eggs, flesh, and honey, and clothing, that's wool, leather, fur, silk, and any other animal products like that. Entertainment, zoos, circuses, petting zoos, etc., and other reasons. So that's veganism. That's what it was sort of meant to be, but it often has been distorted by a lot of by mainstream media, and that's not surprising, since corporate-owned media has a lot of advertisers that promote animal products. So that's not surprising that corporate media would, and they do a lot of other things, of course. Corporate media also distort a lot of things. So that's one reason why people have a very sort of a distorted understanding about what veganism is. So the corporate media, and also animal industry, which is the advertising, and also large animal organizations, sadly, unfortunately, when money is involved and capitalism comes into it, large organizations which they have to pay their workers, and they have various they have various expenses because they're a large organization, and unfortunately they tend to promote the least challenging thing for the public, and that would be to kind of push veganism over there somewhere in the corner and promote things like humane animal use and single-issue campaigns. And single-issue campaigns bring in dollars because they can always ask the public who is not vegan to give them donations for various single-issue campaigns to boycott this and do that, and there's various things. And so single-issue campaigns bring in the dollars, and they very very rarely ever ask people to go vegan. It's somewhere out there, or somewhere that's optional. But really, if you're actually if an organization says they're for animal rights, then rights means not violating the rights of those particular non-human animals. It means, that's what rights are. Just like we wouldn't suggest, if an organization was addressing child slavery, for example, they wouldn't say to the public, well, we're promoting the idea that there's such a thing as humane child slavery. They wouldn't suggest that to the public. They would suggest that child slavery needs to end. And that's the same when it comes to, non-human animal slavery. An ethical vegan wants animal slavery, wants the use of animals for food, clothing, entertainment, and other reasons, wants the end of use of animals as property, seen as resources. So that's what veganism should be, and that's what an animal rights organization should be, or those that say that they are the voice for the voiceless. This is often you hear this. Well, non-human animals, if they had a voice, they would not want to be used as a resource. That's like any sentient being. We don't want to be used as resources, and non-human animals just want to live. They want to exist for their own reason. They don't want to be bred into existence to be used as property. They want to be able to they want to be able to live just like we do. So that's the problems with that's why veganism is so distorted. That's the long answer. That's the long answer to why a lot of us have a misunderstanding about what veganism is, because of the various elements which are often centered around profit making, and that's what happens to a lot of things, doesn't it? When we're trying to make a profit over something, the real ethical reasons get watered down, so that we're not challenging anyone, so that they will discharge their moral responsibility and give us money, and then we can keep our organizations going. Well, that's not beneficial for any ethical position, and that's why veganism has becoming a very popular grassroots nonviolent movement, because that's probably the only way, a grassroots movement, that it is going to really exponentially take hold. And then the real reasons why we should be vegan are at the center, up front and center. It's the moral position, and money doesn't play into it. So that's what veganism is becoming, and that's why I don't belong to any groups. I just belong to a grassroots vegan movement. And a lot of people are seeing that large animal organizations have lost their way. If ever they had a position that was only about non-human animals and their right not to be used as a resource, if ever that was a position, it is gone a long time ago. So I wanted to talk about the so that's I hope that I hope that I've explained to a degree what veganism is, what it's supposed to be, and why it has not been presented very well, and why so many people think it's about diet, or it's a health kick or a fad, and often it's presented as unhealthy and extreme, which is just so not true. And I'll give you a link. I'll put some links in the information section or in the comments section. There's one particular page called nutritionfacts.org, and it's run by Dr. Michael Grieger, and he scans all the latest nutrition journals and science journals, all, a huge amount of them. He has a lot of people who do research for him, and he finds the various human studies, not non-human torture studies, but human studies on the benefits, the tremendous benefits of a plant-based diet, and also the often catastrophic results of even consuming small amounts of animal products. But in our society, we consume a lot of animal products, and I've noticed even over the years it's become more and more. And sadly, a lot of countries, like for example China, they used to have. If you've ever read the China study, that's the largest nutrition study ever undertaken. China actually, there was lots of different rural areas where heart disease, etc., wasn't even heard of. So if you can get a hold of the China study, so nutritionfacts.org, I would, if I may suggest, and it's not a vegan page, it's a plant-based. It's about plant-based diets. So if you subscribe to that, and he often sends out every other day a 2-minute video talking about the latest in nutrition, science, etc. And it's really informative. I found it incredibly informative, and I've been vegan for 12 years. There's lots of things. There's a few things I haven't, and I continue to learn off it. There's quite a few amazing things. I mean, the whole that whole quote, "Let thy medicine be thy food," is so true when you have a look at the benefits of a plant-based diet. So don't believe it when people say, "Oh, where do you get your protein from?" And as if you're lacking in protein. There's plenty of protein in plants. In fact, vegans get 75% more protein than they need every day, just from plants, just from green leafy vegetables, or sorts of plants have protein in them, and they have lots and lots of fantastic nutrients in them that one can't really derive from animal products. So I invite you to check out nutritionfacts.org, and he doesn't make any profit from that. It's just he does that service to the public. I don't make any profit from talking about veganism. I have a vegan website. It's a comprehensive vegan resource in podcast form, and it's called howtogovegan.org, and I don't make any profit from that whatsoever. I don't make any profit at all from talking about veganism. So it's just that I really would love people to go vegan, because it's honestly one of the best decisions I've made in my life, and for so many reasons. The main one is that one is really reducing one's participation in violence, and also that justice is not exclusive. And I realize that my whole life, if I may just talk about, and I'll get to the environmental reasons shortly, but I want to talk about my own becoming vegan, how that happened for me. And it'll just be I'll just sort of reduce the story. I don't want to, and thanks for joining in on this live video, Joe. And I've never done one of these before, but I'm sort of going to venture into that to talk about veganism and some other things as well. But so So yes, so my own personal journey, this wasn't a journey really, my own personal experience with becoming vegan was in 2005 when, and thank goodness for the internet is all I can say, because there's a lot of things that I was a little bit clueless about before I really spent more time online. And I happened to, in about 2005, I just happened to come across something about dairy, the dairy industry. Excuse me, I'm just going to take a sip of this. The dairy industry, I had no idea what how full of violence it is. I mean, I used to, just like everybody else, I enjoyed yogurt and dairy, milk and different products like that. And I don't know why, but it never really occurred to me. I never really thought much about the cows that provided that milk, but in fact, they weren't providing that milk for me. They were providing that milk for their young calf, who is intended to grow really, really rapidly by consuming his or her mother's milk. And so that's the secretions from their mother wasn't meant for humans, and it certainly wasn't meant for me. So I never really thought about dairy very much. I mean, I had been vegetarian on and off during my life, and obviously I couldn't even stick to that. That just shows how heavy speciesism is. The dairy aspect, I just never really, I knew that flesh obviously was very obviously the body parts of a sentient being that had been killed, but I had no idea that the dairy industry, in fact, there's more violence in dairy than there is if one were eating flesh alone. So, and what I mean by that is that male calves in the dairy industry, and this includes in organic dairy, male calves are removed from their mother when they're often just 1 or 2 days old, and they're of no use to the dairy industry, so they're often taken off to a slaughterhouse and killed. And often they're often put on trucks for 24 hours and they're crying for their mother. The mother has been separated from her calf, and she grieves and cries for 2 or 3 days. And if you've ever heard or ever seen a mother and her calf being separated, I've seen that because I live in rural Tasmania. And before we moved and built this house, we used to live beside, we were surrounded by cows, and this is not even the dairy industry I'm going to talk about right now, but we were surrounded by cows that were being raised for their flesh, and regularly, they would separate the mothers from the calves for whatever purpose, whether those calves were being taken off to be killed in a slaughterhouse, or whether they were being taken to another farm, or whatever the reason. But I just remember this one time where the mothers were all in a corral and the calves were being put on a truck, and the mothers were crying and bellowing. It was awful, actually. Bellowing and bellowing, and we listened to that bellowing for those calves for days, for 2 or 3 days. It was awful. And I took a video of it, in fact, which I put up. And I don't think people realize, when you have, this is just like me, before I became vegan, we have these animal products on our plate, and we're so divorced from from the sentient beings who used to be alive and then were killed for these animal products. We're so sort of removed from all of that, removed from what's on the supermarket shelves. We don't think about it, and we're so heavily indoctrinated right from the word go that we think that it's all very this is all very normal. Animal use is like breathing, isn't it? We just think that because that's the way we've been brought up, to think that animal use is just like breathing, and animal products are everywhere. They're in everything almost. I mean, even as a vegan, like this computer that I'm using, it has animal glue made from probably animals. The tires on cars have animal products in them. The roads have animal products in them. It's almost impossible to avoid, although alternatives could easily be employed for these things. But because we can get away with using animal products in everything, we just go that way because we can. It's like a human supremacist attitude. We do it because we can, and we can get away with it. I mean, who's going to stop us? So I didn't realize that it was only until I became vegan I realized how pervasive animal use is, and how much animal products are used in everything. So what I'm trying to say is that I didn't realize that when I was eating dairy and yogurt, etc., I didn't realize that there were mothers and calves behind that, and the terrible, tragic violence that happens behind this, behind these animal products. And now when I see, all the rows of litre cartons of milk, what I see when I look at that are male calves being dragged across the slaughterhouse floors, and they're sucking on the fingers of the slaughterhouse workers and crying. They've been on a truck for a day or so without their mother, without any sort of drink or food. They don't give them anything, and then they're dragged across the slaughterhouse floors crying, and there's blood everywhere, and this terrible stench of blood and fear, and and they're killed. They have their throats slit, and they're put up in shackles. That it's just slaughterhouses are a horror house, and that's dairy. The male calves are byproducts of the dairy industry. They become veal, and the mothers are crying for their calves, and of course there's all sorts of other awful things behind dairy, like they call it a rape rack, where they artificially inseminate the mothers. A rape rack. This is the term in the dairy industry. Their mothers have incredibly enlarged udders because it's not normal for their udders to be that big, but they've been bred to be like that. And so their udders are incredibly painful a lot of the time, and they're absolutely, they're relieved to be able to go and have their milk taken from them because their calf isn't there to do it. So it actually relieves the pain of their udders, and they often get mastitis as a result of having, they get inflammations in their udders. So there's all sorts of problems, there's all sorts of awful things that go on in the dairy industry, and that includes the organic dairy industry. The happy mum and pop farms that they can't have male calves there, and of course the female calves are just enslaved like their mothers. So this is what I came across online when I was reading about. I don't know how I happened to be reading about dairy, how I came across it, but that when I read just some of the information, it wasn't even as detailed as it wasn't as detailed as what I'm telling you, but I just remember reading about the male calves, and I just was horrified. I thought, oh, how can this be allowable? How can this be okay? And yet that's what welfare is. Welfare has nothing to do with the animals. It has everything to do with economic efficiency. So any sort of welfare measures that are implemented on any of these farms have everything to do with economic efficiency, and that includes in slaughterhouses. Excuse me. In slaughterhouses, they started. There's things that are employed in slaughterhouses that prevent worker injuries. There's still horror houses, but the things that they've implemented have nothing to do with the animals. They have everything to do with preventing worker injuries, so it costs less for the industry. So anyway, when I read this thing about dairy, I was sort of horrified, and then I had a discussion with my partner, and then we talked about and then we decided, well, if we're going to reject this sort of animal use, this particular form of animal use, we should reject it all, because obviously it's all messed up if that's dairy. And it turns out, of course, that when you look into it, there's the other forms of animal use are just as hideous. And I'm talking about the so-called happy animals, the happy animal, the happy animal use that we hear about, all the happy cows and all that sort of stuff. It's just a nonsense. It's just a scam to sell animal products. So we realize that the whole welfare thing is a nonsense. It's just hideous what goes on. And so I literally became vegan overnight, and so did my partner. And and that's what it is, veganism. It's an ethical position. Once that light goes on, you sort of can't unring that bell. You can't unring that bell. Once you realize, boom, that it's wrong, and you get it in here and here, but mostly in here. Once you internalize that ethical position, there's no going back. And that's why when people constantly present veganism as a diet, and they present veganism as a sort of an environmental issue, which it is. I mean, well, they're the ancillary benefits of veganism. Environment, climate change. You can solidly address climate change by going vegan, because we can quibble about the percentages, but World Watch Institute says that 51% of greenhouse gases are from animal agriculture. And if you watch the documentary Cowspiracy, I'll just read you a little bit, if I may, from Chris Hedges' essay about, it's called Apocalyptic Capitalism. And I wonder how long I've been doing this so far. I'm not sure how long I've been talking. I don't want to sort of overdo it and kind of overdo it on a first talk about veganism. Anyway, I'll just talk briefly about the environmental reasons, so that gives you another idea of why it's great to go vegan. Firstly, for non-human animals and their right not to be used as a resource, and then but then the ancillary benefits are also amazing, because it involves a lot of, it involves us, it involves the rest of the planet, the other people in other countries, because climate change is going to affect all of us. And even if it is the case that it's too late for us in some ways to turn around climate change, the very least we can do is become vegan and firstly stop the breeding into existence of animals, sentient animals, to be used as things, because they love life just as we do and don't want to die. And secondly, the incredible health benefits of that, of becoming vegan. When you look at nutritionfacts.org, you'll realize how toxic animal products can be, even in small amounts, for our bodies. They just really don't belong in our bodies. And I never would have thought that, but it's true. I mean, I'm not just saying that. I'm not trying to present a pretty picture. It honestly, animal products really just don't belong in our body. They really don't. And this third reason, which there are so many reasons, there are so many things attached to the third reason of and the environmental reasons to go vegan. I'll just read you a little bit from this, and there's some speciesist language in here, unfortunately, but it's excuse me while I just line it up here. So I'll read you just something from Chris Hedges' essay, Apocalyptic Capitalism, on page 2, and it was published on December 6th, 2015. So it says, the animal agriculture industry has, in a staggering act of near-total censorship, managed to stifle public discussion about the industry's complicity in global warming. It is barely mentioned in climate summits, yet livestock and their byproducts as Kip Anderson and Keegan Kuhn point out in their book The Sustainability Secret and their documentary Cowspiracy, account for at least 32,000 million tonnes of carbon dioxide per year, or 51% of all worldwide greenhouse gas emissions. Methane and nitrous oxide are rarely mentioned in climate talks, although these two greenhouse gases are, as the authors point out, respectively 86 times or 296 times more destructive than carbon dioxide. Cows worldwide, they write, produce 150 billion gallons of methane daily, and 65% of the nitrous oxide produced by human-related activities is caused by the animal agriculture industry. I might have missed something there. No, that's right. Water used in fracking, they write, ranges from 70 billion to 140 billion gallons annually. Animal agriculture water consumption, the book notes, ranges from 34 trillion to 76 trillion gallons annually. Raising animals for human consumption takes up to 45% of the planet's land. 91% of the deforestation of the Amazon rainforest, and this is a really amazing thing, 91% of the deforestation of the Amazon rainforest and up to 80% of global rainforest loss are caused by clearing land for the grazing of livestock. Sorry to use the word livestock, that's a speciesist term, but anything like livestock or whatever, cattle, it's all speciesist. But anyway, grazing of livestock and growing feed crops for meat and dairy animals. As more and more rainforest disappears, the planet loses one of the primary means to safely sequester carbon dioxide. The animal agriculture industry is, as Anderson and Kuhn write, also a principal cause of species extinction and a creation of more than 95,000 square miles of nitrogen-flooded dead zones in the ocean. A person who eats a plant-based diet, they point out, a diet free of meat, dairy, and eggs, saves 1,100 gallons of water, 45 pounds of grain, 30 square feet of forested land, 20 pounds of CO2 equivalent, and prevents the torture and murder of one sentient animal's life every day. So that's they're sort of startling statistics. I mean, if you think about it, one acre of Amazon rainforest is cleared every, I think it's every minute. One acre of Amazon rainforest is cleared every minute for cow grazing and for soy production to feed cows in other in large animal agriculture industrial farms. So that's an amazing statistic when you think about it. So if one is concerned about climate change and is concerned about wildlife, and I put that in quotes, one has to really seriously think about the tremendous problems that climate change poses for other species on the planet and for our species. And if we can address the 51% of greenhouse gases which are from animal agriculture and all that means, then that's an amazing thing that we can do for the planet. Firstly, I always say that it's the non-human animals, they're not our resources. They belong on this planet just as we do. We don't own this planet. We don't own other species. We don't have the right to be breeding them into existence, sentient beings, and to be using them as things, as resources. We really don't. And just because they're another species makes no difference. It doesn't make any more difference than if somebody is from a different racial group or is has a different gender to us, it has a different sexual orientation. They're all irrelevant criterion as to whether we have, as to whether they have the right to belong to the moral community. And species is just as irrelevant a criterion as race or gender or sexual orientation, etc. It's just as irrelevant. it's only that we've been indoctrinated to believe that that because they're a different species, that makes them lesser. Because they're not like us, that makes them lesser. Because they don't have the same cognitive abilities, makes them lesser. But that's, I mean, there are people on the planet who don't have different cognitive abilities, that are differently abled. But that doesn't mean that it's okay for us to exploit them. And the same with non-human animals. There's a lot of things that non-human animals can do that we can't. Does that make them more important, more morally important than us? No, not really. And does it make us less morally important? We're not more morally important because we have abilities that we think are important and that we think we value, and because those other beings, those other sentient beings, don't have those particular characteristics or whatever, that makes them lesser. Because that's gotten us into all sorts of trouble in this world today. This belief that and particularly for white heterosexual society, in a heteronormative sort of a society where that's valued, that doesn't. And I'm sorry, I'm losing my track here. But what I'm trying to say is that we get ourselves into all sorts of trouble here by believing that everybody needs to be the same, that we have to homogenize the world so that we feel safe, and we feel, because we think that our way of being is the most important way to be. That's gotten us into all sorts of trouble, and it also has created boundaries and separation between other people and ourselves, other groups and ourselves, and between other animals and ourselves. We've kind of lost our way in a way, and we've separated ourselves from one another, from other humans, with this whole appearance thing, how people appear. And we've also separated ourselves from other animals because of their appearance and their different ways of being. And that is at the center of a lot of the violence today, is our separation from one another because we think, because others are different to us, therefore they treated with a sort of either contempt or fear, or if we think that we can dominate them, if they're vulnerable, we try and do that. That's something that our species seems to be afflicted with, a sort of a pathology of this constantly otherizing groups, and the discriminations that cause violence. And so that's why if we embrace veganism, the ethical position, and we realize that we have been indoctrinated, just like with other indoctrinations that cause violence. We've been indoctrinated to believe right from when we were born that we human beings are the crown of creation, that we human beings, that this is the way, that we are the most important animals on the planet, that we don't even think of ourselves anymore as animals. We've completely divorced ourselves from what we are, and we are just another animal like other animals. We think we're the crown of creation, that we're the most important animal on the planet, and that all other animals on the planet are here for us to use because we can, the human supremacist thing. And we all also think, a lot of us even think that we're the only species in the universe. We're so kind of taken up with ourselves and sort of deluded that we don't even sort of seem to think. We don't think that there's probably many millions of other civilizations out in this massively huge universe that we live in. So anyway, our indoctrination has really been the driver for the violence towards non-human animals. And until we recognize them as the sentient beings that they are, as the moral persons that that they deserve at least one very basic right, not to be used as a thing, as a resource, and that they are the animals out there that are in the fields that are eventually going to be killed, no matter how happy they might look in the fields. They are just like the dogs and cats that we share our house with, who we consider valuable family members and that we love so much. They are just like those dogs and cats. The only difference between the dogs and cats whom we share our life with and whom we love, the only difference between those animals and the animals that are out in the fields and that are dying every second of every day in the slaughterhouses all over the world and in the oceans are being emptied because we are not vegan. The only difference between the dogs and cats and all those animals who love life, just like the animals who share our houses with, is that we don't have a personal relationship with them, and we haven't had a personal relationship with them. But anybody who's ever had a sanctuary, been to a sanctuary, or has owned a sanctuary, knows that the pigs and the cows and other animals on those sanctuaries, they can develop a relationship with them just like they do with dogs and cats, whom many of us live with and whom we consider family members. But the thing to remember is that it doesn't matter if they were nothing like the dogs and cats we live with and didn't show any emotions that the dogs and cats we share with or that we can relate to. It doesn't matter at all what we think of them, how we view them, whether we think they're valuable or not. That makes no difference as to their real moral value. What we think of them as humans means nothing to their actual moral value, which is equal to us, equally morally valuable because they are sentient. So, our view of them really means nothing, really. Just like our view of other cultures doesn't mean, what we think of another culture is just what we think. It doesn't make it so, whatever we think. So anyway, but what I'm trying to say is that and dogs and cats, by the way, are viewed as property in society. Lots of people dump dogs and cats in shelters and they're killed by the millions every year. And so they're also viewed as property. And it's very important, of course, as a vegan, I always advocate that people should should adopt and foster non-human animals from shelters, because they're refugees of domestication as well. So anyway, that's really all I wanted to say for now. I tend to have this. I meander a lot through issues sometimes. I sort of start off talking about something and end up way over there. So please excuse me. It's sort of something that I tend to do. And eventually, when Facebook allows people from countries outside the US to post live on their various pages, I'll hopefully be able to extend this to my other pages. But I invite you. If you found any of this at all interesting or something that you might want to ask questions about, please feel free to leave questions in the comments section of this video, and maybe next live video I do, I'll sort of answer some of those questions if I can, and also if I could invite you to join my Facebook page, howtogovegan.org. I think it's actually howtogovegan.org is actually the username of that page, and I'll leave that in the information in the comments section. And also, if you, I have a political page too, but I'll talk about that in another episode, if you could call it that. Anyway, I don't know if anybody, I think it's just Joe watching at the moment, so hi Joe, thanks for watching. And anybody else who popped in, Alistair and whoever else, thanks for watching, and I hope to do another one in a week's time or something like that. So you can probably click the live notifications if you want to watch the next one. And I'll probably talk about specific things about veganism, different questions, and or I might do something to do with a human social justice issue. It's all related, it's all interconnected, and I often try to draw connections and comparisons because it is all related. As you know, I hope to make that clearer in future videos. So thanks very much for watching, and if you're a vegan and you have any questions, if you're interested in veganism and you have any questions at all, I'm more than happy to answer any of them and to assist you in becoming vegan, because honestly, it's one of the greatest, you'll find, it's one of the greatest decisions you could make in your life. Truly, it really is kind of life-changing, and vegan food is delicious. Truly, there's this whole idea that mainstream media put out that it's boring food and that it's just salads and whatever. I mean, there's so many different cuisines, and plant-based diets are just absolutely, totally yummy. So anyway, till next time, thanks so much for watching, and my name's Trish Roberts, and I look forward to your company again. Bye for now.